Hey there. Well, got those cabbage, broccoli, and cauliflower plants as well as the lettuce into the ground finally today. I bought the plants last Friday, but was waiting on someone to dig out some compost for me. If you want to watch me garden, you can listen to the same episode on YouTube or on my Patreon page. Links are where you'd expect them to be. I'm getting a taste for writing my movie reviews here for the podcast. Remember, the ting is air quotes. It might just become a regular feature of your listening to Radio Revel, which certainly fits in with how I want to structure the podcast for the next season, so adding them this season kind of gives me some practice. Now, before I get into the review, I want to add some disclaimers, just to mimic some other podcasters and podcast shows. This episode is about a film that was rated R, meaning that it involves a number of things we like to pretend our kids aren't aware of, like
sex, pornography, drug use, tobacco use, dirty words, male genitals.
You know, the kind of things that happen on a nearly day-to-day basis in the real world. Of course, it was not rated R because of other social aspects that were presented, like residential areas being planted beside oil refineries, or vice versa. Not considered as the poverty, the I don't have $400 for an emergency reality that the principal characters live with. We certainly don't take into account that some of the illegal drug use is justified by not being able to pay for the legal drugs that might alleviate a health issue. With a subtle backdrop of the 2015 presidential campaign, which we hear from TVs and radios in the background, we've got the story of a regular Joe the plumber from Texas who was able to escape from his hometown to follow a dream, only to partially wake up from that dream and find himself back in his hometown with literally only the shirt on his back. Well, that and some jeans and red underwear. This guy is good looking, young, pleasant of personality, but he's a true and blue egoist. Nearly everything he does and says in the film is in his own best interest, or at least that's what he thinks. This guy's name is Mikey. Yeah, Mikey, like,
let's get Mikey! Yeah! He won't eat it. He hates everything.
But not the same. The story kind of follows this guy, Mikey, from when he shows up at his wife's mother's house where she, the wife, has been living since he abandoned her to go make porno films in California. Now, it must be known that this wife made porno films with him before he left, and I don't think we ever get a clear idea of why he ended up leaving. He did pretty well in California, made a lot of films, won a couple of porn film awards, but something happened. We are also not filled in, and he ended up back in Texas. So he can't get a job. No one in Texas will hire an ex-porn star, not because he's an ex-porn star. They all check out his videos at his insistence and don't seem all that bothered by that part of his work history. No, the reason is that he might be recognized by clients, which would make them feel uncomfortable.
I'm just not sure our customers would be comfortable with you waiting on them. They may have seen one of your movies.
And that would make them think about something they'd otherwise block while he's serving them their food, for example. That to me is just like rating a film R because of language that we know that almost everyone uses, or because of sexual content that we know almost everyone takes part in, or a newer disclaimer on tobacco use in film. Oh dear, one of the characters smokes cigarettes. What will become of our children?
Think of the children. Won't somebody please think of the children?
No, stop. Think of the children.
Think of the children. Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
Despite not finding a regular job, Mikey does find a way to make some money. Drugs, of course. Selling joints out of a donut shop where a little 17-year-old vixen has caught his eye, as well as other parts of his anatomy. Joints he rolls himself in star-spangled rolling paper, sold to topless dancers at a local club and oil workers from one of the refineries. Somehow Mikey imagines that barely legal vixen to be his ticket out of small-town Texas and back into the porn star's spotlight. She certainly seems to be open to the prospect. Whatever you may think about the details surrounding Mikey's work as a porn star, the story itself is all too familiar. The actor himself had a brief stint in porn early on in his career. He said it was to help pay bills and that he hoped it wouldn't come back to haunt him when he became a movie star. It has come back, but certainly doesn't haunt him at all. Forget about the raunchy details a moment. Small-time guy with ambition manages to get out of small-town rut, moves far away and makes a life for himself, but mismanages that life and ends up back in small town. The only changes he can see, and he doesn't expect many, is that everyone is a few years older, some of them not even recognizable. The wife left behind is still doing drugs and living off benefits. Her mother is still smoking like a chimney and suffering some unnamed pain. They both live in near poverty in a rundown rental that looks like it's ready to implode from miscare. The streets are the same, the characters who didn't get away are the same, everything is the same, just a few years older. This is a magnet story, the magnet of home that some people are so drawn to no matter how far away they roam. Lots of us are able to resist the pull of that magnet. We don't turn to that odd concept of home, of family, when things get rough. We just rough it out where we've chosen to be, maybe realizing that things might be rougher in the origin. Mikey wasn't able to resist the pull of his personal magnet. Now, I'm not from Texas, though my folks lived there for several years, yet giving into the pull of the Midwestern magnet in their final years. My sister lives there, has done for decades. Even so, a real connection was possible. The aspirations of a person who wants to get away, the necessary egoism of that same person. If you care too much about those who feed the magnet, you end up being part of that same magnet, and magnets stuck together are harder to separate. It's a sad irony that the one action that Mikey takes that is not totally self-serving turns out to be the catalyst for another failure in his life. Just as he's on the point of climbing out of that rut that he himself helps dig, he's shoved back into its bottom by those who he thought he was being fair to. That doesn't mean he won't get back up on his feet. There's a hint of that resilience in the final images. And though I wouldn't say that it is a main message, it's no accident that while we watch Mikey weave a fantasy world based upon his own self-serving, non-empathetic behavior, his use of others to get what he thinks he wants and needs, we hear on those background soundtracks the incipient cues of the rise to power by a man even more obscene and grotesque than Mikey might be thought to be. That may give us a ray of hope. If someone like that can become president, despite his character, or lack of same, then maybe Mikey, who I think we end up liking despite his flaws, can get back into the game, reach those goals no matter what each of us may think of the details. Or was I taken in by those flaws? Have I relaxed my standards just because the guy is good looking and not that bad of a guy? That message of a certain imposter syndrome is there, though. While Mikey's inherent honesty makes us accept at face value the majority of his claims to fame, he obviously isn't who he is telling us he is. Others in the film also play at being imposters. The useless neighbor in fake military garb, the drug queen's useless son, even the donut shop vixen, they are all pretending that by pretending to be who they are pretending to be, they become that being. There were some slow sections. The pace of the movie is andante, a stroll. Mikey gets around mostly on a bike. Sometimes he gets a ride with the vixen or that useless, manipulable, some words in English, manipulable neighbor, which turns out just terrible for the neighbor, the unexpected incident revealing without a doubt just how egocentric Mikey is. But everyone is mainly just walking here to there, and remember, distances in America are grand. The pace of the film just follows them all around. I enjoyed it a lot. Of course, you'll have to put aside any issues you may have with dirty words. Come on, you've heard them all before. Maybe you've even used one or two of them yourself. Or constant reference to the porn industry, but it's only talked about, never portrayed on screen. That's in California. We're in Texas. I think, though, that you'll probably be able to connect, and if not, at least sympathize with a present and predominant slice of American social realism that needs attention that it's not really getting. This film reminds me of that series I talked about back in Update Episode 2. You know where to find the link to it. That series was Somebody Somewhere. Guess I like to consume fiction that reminds me of my own origin stories. I gave this one a 6 out of 10, I think, maybe 6.5. Excellent acting, curious script, competent direction, again slow in places, but at least not graphically violent. There's a lot more sex than slugging it out. I do recommend it. And don't forget to check out my own stories of that same kind of American social realism. And stay tuned for other changes coming up for the podcast. Cheers!
You're listening to Radio Revel. Listen, like, subscribe, and share.